information for parking, bicycles, and maps. That's kind of difficult. Came into DC. There were a lot of roads blocked off all around the city today, especially around Constitution Avenue, right down there. A lot of police cars blocking the roads. I think there's a March for Life happening in DC today as well, a pro-life or anti-abortion protest happening in DC the same day. Yeah, it was a logistical nightmare for me to get into the city. I had to drive around 45 minutes just to get to this half of the city once I got in. So probably best, if anybody still isn't here yet, to take the metro. In terms of bicycles, I don't know if there's anywhere it looks like people have some bikes over there. So if you come with a bike, you can just kind of set it up right over here, leave it over here. Let's talk to some people. So do any of you guys want to explain why you've braved the cold to come out here today?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're out here in solidarity with Julian Assange. By now, I think most people know who Assange is, right? He's a journalist who's being persecuted horribly by the United States for the crime of telling the truth, of exposing U.S. brutality, of exposing U.S. war crimes. I mean, every day, all of us live with the brutality of this system, right? We know what it is, what it's like to be chewed up by capitalism. People abroad know what it is to be chewed up by imperialism. What people are getting killed by drones, by bombs, by economic warfare. And what Julian did was he exposed the U.S. so horribly, right? He embarrassed the U.S. He embarrassed President Obama personally, because that collateral murder video, that came out like 4 or 5 months after Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
And in the interim, the U.S. denied the video, and then they lied about it, and then they said there was nothing wrong in the video, and they said the rules of engagement were followed, and they did some sort of sham investigation, and nothing came of it. But what came of it was that people's eyes were opened, and that's all thanks to Julian Assange, to Chelsea Manning, to people like Daniel Hale and John Kiriakou and other whistleblowers. And so I'm here because I know what the U.S. is. The U.S. is a horrible system, and Julian Assange was exposing that, and I'm going to stand out here with everyone in solidarity with Julian today.
Hell yeah. We got to be out here in the 30-degree, 25-degree freezing weather, because, you know, if we're not, who's going to show up? And you're with Code Pink?
I'm with Code Pink. My name's Leo, yeah.
Nice. You guys do good work. I always love the work you guys do. All right. See you later. I'll be back. So that was somebody from Code Pink making really good critiques of U.S. imperialism, U.S. militarism, the role that Assange played in exposing U.S. imperialism and militarism, and the idea that nothing changed after that. You know, we're still engaged in wars around the world. Assange is still being persecuted just for the crime of publishing information about U.S. war crimes. Let's talk to somebody else, see if anybody else wants to answer the question. Hey, would you want to explain why you braved the cold to come out here today?
Okay, but let me fix this.
Yeah, no problem. No, understandable.
Sure.
Truth is not a crime.
After they announced that it was safe. And I think that's the case here too.
Lots of traffic in DC today. Yeah, Code Pink's always been out here in solidarity with Julian Assange. Over the summer, I had been at a protest here outside the DOJ building, and lots of people from Code Pink came out to support.
We need a socialist program to take care of the economy.
Yeah, would you guys want to talk about that on the stream? Why we need a socialist program in the U.S.? Eco-socialist? Totally agree.
I don't know you, so
You don't know me? Totally fine. I understand.
who are you?
Kobe. My name's Kobe. I'm an independent journalist.
Uh-huh.
Member of the Green Party, actually, so eco-socialism. I love eco-socialism.
What state?
Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in Montgomery County. Live in Frederick County now.
Sorry for you.
Well, in Frederick, yeah. I feel ya. That's why I am currently studying abroad in Sweden. Yeah. Just back for a few weeks. In Lund. Lund, Sweden, yeah. Not as cold there, surprisingly. You'd think it's far north. In Uppsala? Nice. Never been.
He founded the Department of Peace and Conflict Research.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Was head chair of the department, an endowed chair, a lifetime chair until he hit 66 or 70, I forget which. Triggered his having to go to senior status.
What made, what kind of work does he do with that? Peace and conflict.
Very academic. The textbook for undergraduate students on peace and conflict.
Oh, wow. I wonder if my professors have used it.
I'm sure they
I'll say I'm a human rights master's student, so I would bet.
He also had an endowed chair at Notre Dame at the same time because this is Joan Kroc,
I don't know.
the widow of McDonald's,
Oh.
Ray Kroc. Joan Kroc had a pile of money, and she started donating to Notre Dame to create the Institute of Peace Research at Notre Dame. And it started with $20 million. And eventually, her foundation, certainly after she died, eventually they donated like $100 million. And so he had two endowed chairs simultaneously, one at Uppsala and one at Notre Dame. Expert on Dag Hammarskjöld. Dag Hammarskjöld grew up in this.
We need a lot more peace and diplomacy, not war. That's why I wanted to study human rights in Sweden. I figured learning it in a international context, in a Swedish context,
They
might...
weren't real helpful for Julian Assange.
No, not at all, not at all. And they actually, they've recently passed their own whistleblower law, I think, that if you publish information about the Swedish government's ties with other governments or something like that, classified information, the same sort of crimes. I think it was Nils Melzer who had talked about. I don't know all the semantics of that bill, but they passed a bill that will make it even harder to publish information about their dealings with the world. Yeah, global phenomenon, censorship. So we are just waiting for more people to show up to get started today. Like I said earlier, there's going to be some speakers. Very, very cold in DC. You can see everybody's very bundled up today. Let's go look at some of these signs. Department of Justice, Criminalizing Journalism. And again, Justice for Julian. If you can, definitely write a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland calling for him to, and the Biden administration in general, to drop all charges against Julian Assange. Like I said earlier, they're trying to send him to prison for 175 years just for working with Chelsea Manning to publish the Iraq war logs. A journalistic activity. You know, journalists always work with whistleblowers and publish their documents. It's important to remember that those Iraq war logs that Julian published with WikiLeaks were also published by other journalism outlets, like I want to say the New York Times, Der Spiegel in Germany. And so if they can arrest Assange for what he published, you know, the confidential information revealing U.S. war crimes that he published, if they can get him, what's to stop them from going after any other journalist who publishes classified information that reveals wrongdoing by the U.S. government? That's the precedent we're talking about here. That's why international journalism organizations from around the world have called to drop all the charges against Julian Assange. I think we're getting close to getting started now. So like, subscribe, share the video. Sorry it's not a portrait view, horizontal view. I was trying to set it up that way, but I don't think it automatically adjusted. Yeah, I've always taken this Julian Assange activism pretty seriously. His work was my entry point into learning about horrible U.S. militarism and imperialism. I was in high school, actually. We published the Iraq war logs. We watched a documentary about it in my AP Poli-Sci class. Hello. How's it going?
How's school going for you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Pretty good. I'm going back in 2 weeks. I finally found housing for this semester.
Good.
Yeah, that had been a mess.
Yeah, I can imagine going to another country. And,
Yeah, then I missed the deadline to extend my lease, so I had to find new housing and found it this week, so that's nice.
that's
Luckily, in Sweden, in Lund. Luckily, all of our classes are online because of COVID for 2 or 3 more weeks, so I'm not missing anything.
they didn't start yet, did they?
Not yet, no. Nope. I think we're waiting on somebody. Hey, long time no see.
No, I was surprised you were back here.
Very, very cold.
Yeah.
It's colder than Sweden.
Yeah, it hasn't been cold like this in a while. Yeah, I'm like, I feel like I'm back in Chicago.
So do you want to tell the camera who you are, why you're out here
Hi.
protesting for Assange?
Sure, I'm Christine. I'm out here for Assange because I think it's important that we protect journalism and we protect people who tell the truth. And he shouldn't even be where he is. So we're hopefully things will change, but you know.
How long have you been doing Assange activism? I know I saw you here over the summer.
Oh man, I think we're rolling around like 2 years now.
Nice.
Yeah, something like that, 1.5, 2.
Any progress, it feels like? Any momentum?
Yes and no. So like watching Paula get people who were saying they were coming like to this event, like we're starting to see bigger people, at least in the United States, talking about Assange a little bit more. So that's like a little bit of hope, but
Yeah. Well, now we're seeing governments around the world kind of using it as a political football, so
Yeah.
some momentum, but we'll
a little
see.
bit, but
All right, we are officially getting started.
Welcome everyone. I want to thank you for showing up on the coldest day of the year. Believe me, I didn't choose this day because of that. I'm Paula Isella. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Boston area Assange Defense Group. Today's action is in response to the December UK High Court ruling to greenlight Julian's extradition to the US. Julian remains in solitary at Belmarsh Prison as the appeal process drags out. Julian's life depends on us applying pressure on Congress in order for them to apply pressure on the Biden administration to stop this prosecution. We must lobby Congress hard. There's material on the information table to help you educate and lobby your representatives. Please sign and address one of the sample letters to Merrick Garland. There's some bumper stickers on the table. Please help yourself to them. Any donation to Stella Morris's legal team fundraiser would be appreciated. We have a stellar lineup of guests speaking today. Before I forget, we want to take a group photo around 3 o'clock. Tomorrow, between 4 and 6 p.m., I'll be doing my 7th vigil outside Attorney General Merrick Garland's home. This one will be small, like they all are, and peaceful, and it's going to be a lantern light vigil. So I hope some of you are interested in joining me. If you're interested, please talk to me, take me aside, and I'll give you some details. I would like to leave you with an image today. The square footage of these two fortress-like dehumanizing doors is larger than the prison cell that the U.S. intelligence agencies hope to imprison Julian in. Now I'd like to introduce Randy Credico, who graciously offered to MC today's event. As a comedian, Randy, at age 27, made an appearance on the Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. As an activist, he spent 4 years in Tulia, Texas, bringing national attention to a racially charged mass drug arrest. He is the former director of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. As an activist in the political arena, at age 37, Randy began a campaign against New York State's Rockefeller drug laws, which he knew were too harsh, disproportionately affecting the poor and minorities. Randy currently hosts Live on the Fly and the Assange Countdown to Freedom. He is a natural radio host. And I'm going to wait for this truck to pass. Randy is a natural radio host. I have never known anyone to create such quality content in such a short, overlapping amount of time. Randy's gift is producing on the fly. Thank you, Randy, for being here today.
Thank you, Paula. I'm going to wait for the truck to come back by before I start talking. I don't want you to hear what I have to say. All right, first of all, can I just take this off for a second? I'm sweating. All right, just stay far away. All right, I am Randy Craig. Paula, Sella, thank you. And she deserves a huge round of applause for putting this together. Paula, you're amazing. And it's people like you that are going to make this happen. I know there are radio hosts like me and radio hosts like my good friend who's coming up soon, Brian Becker, that can spread the information. There are lawyers out there that can do the work in the courtrooms, but without a ground game, without winter soldiers, this movement will not succeed. So it's important that people look at this example, Assange defense, putting this together, and people around the world. I know there are people in Dublin, there are people in Rome, in Mexico City, Sydney, London, my friend MEB, who are always out there. And so without a huge movement, this represents what Thomas Paine called the winter soldier. And that's what it really requires, our winter soldiers. And this is one of those days where we have winter soldiers out here. So thank you for showing up. I have a lot to say, but I think I'll kind of spread it out because as people come in, not a lot to say, but I have some things to say. I know I'm going to bring Brian Becker up here first. I want to say, Brian Becker, before I bring up, it was 4.5 years ago, when I was subpoenaed by the Justice Department or by the House Intel Committee as supposedly a back channel from Julian Assange to Roger Stone, as if Julian Assange would like, here, give this to Roger Stone, all right, before I put it out. Here, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Give it to Roger. He'll keep it quiet. Right. I mean, the whole thing was so ludicrous, but you know, you got Ari Melber, you got Chris Hayes, I'm sorry about that. Chris Hayes and all these other clowns coming out, even Jeremy Scahill, that believed it, you know, and I took the fifth, and Julian did not want me to take the fifth. He wanted me to go up there and say it didn't happen and bring my dog. He said, I'll pay for the dog to go down there. And, but I came down here and I did Brian's show with John Kiriakou, one of the few Loud and Clear shows. Loud and Clear did it. They're the ones that were the first ones that came out slamming the entire operation on Julian Assange. And I appreciate that. I did that show that first time when I came down here. I said no. And that night I got a call from John Pilger saying that he was in the embassy with Julian listening to that show, and he really appreciated it. All right, so Brian Becker is the national coordinator for ANSWER, the ANSWER Coalition. He's been anti-war for decades. He's worked with the great late Ramsey Clark, and he's out there, man. He's a real grunt. He's got a show, a podcast, the Socialist program. That's it. And so, without further ado, Brian Becker.
All right, bro.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you, Paula. I agree with what Randy said about Paula and the fact that people taking initiative and actually trying to make a difference does make a difference. And it's the only thing that makes a difference, basically. When you go over just the things that we know about in the last, say 70 years, like the passage of the '64 Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Congress that passed those two far-reaching pieces of legislation, from a point of view of composition, it was the same Congress in 1954 and 1955 that upheld apartheid in America. The composition of Congress didn't change. What changed was the people changed. The people were in the streets. There was the Civil Rights Revolution. That's what changed the country, and that's ultimately what changed Congress. And so without people like Paula and like all of us actually organizing and doing the work day to day, change doesn't happen. And sometimes when you feel a little bit despondent because the change isn't happening at a given moment, or the crowd's not big enough at a given moment, we have to remember that all of those leaders of the civil rights movement, before they became leaders of a mass movement, they were leaders of very small movements. Because big movements don't just drop from the sky, they come about as a consequence of all of this day-to-day rain or shine kind of activism. And then there are moments when the small movements become big movements. And that's what we have to think about with Julian, because I'd say the majority of the people in the world agree with us that Julian Assange should not be in prison because he revealed U.S. war crimes. And that's the only reason he's in prison. Nothing that WikiLeaks published is untrue. Nothing. There's no fake news there. And it wasn't just WikiLeaks. When Julian worked with Chelsea Manning and revealed the criminal murders of journalists and Iraqi civilians in the Iraq war logs, it wasn't just WikiLeaks. The Washington Post published it, and the New York Times, and the Guardian. Well, if he's in jail, why are they not in jail? And if he's in jail, why are they not speaking up to demand that he be out of jail? Because they did exactly what he did, publish materials that are true. And at the time they published them, they were very proud of them. So what happened? What changed? I mean, as the government decided to persecute and prosecute Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, the so-called free press abandoned them. Instead of showing journalistic integrity and courage and basic human decency, they allowed Julian to be taken down, to be incarcerated. And when the United Nations said that his long stay in the Ecuadorian embassy was an example of arbitrary detention, why was that not big news? Arbitrary detention means he's illegally imprisoned. Why is that not big news? So, you know, the free press, so-called, they can talk about this or that difference between this or that Democratic or Republican politician. But when it comes to the war in Iraq, or the invasion of Afghanistan, or the sanctions on Venezuela, or the blockade of Cuba, or any of the issues that are priorities for U.S. imperialism, they close ranks. So we are standing here today in front of the Department of Injustice and demanding on behalf of people who, and we believe we are the majority, that this prosecution and persecution of Julian Assange end, that it be ended, and that if the Department of Justice wants to even pretend to have the name justice in the name of the agency, there can be no other course but then to free Julian Assange. So I'll just end it there. Again, Paula, thank you very much. It is the coldest day of the year, and we don't blame you for it. In fact, we salute you for taking the position that rain or shine, warm or cold, we're going to stand together and demand freedom for Julian Assange. Thank you very much.
Brian Becker, thank you. Very well said, Brian. Thank you very much. And you know, I came here last night. Paula asked me last week, "Would you like to come down?" I said, "Yeah, of course." I didn't say of course. Let me think about it. 5 minutes later, I said, "I'm coming." All right. So I said, "Do you mind if I'm going to come down here at night? I'm going to do at the Tabard Inn. We were here 4 months ago, and we had a comedy show there called Stand-Ups for Assange." And I said, "Why don't we invite everybody? It's free. We're going to have one tonight at 7 o'clock at the Tabard Inn. You just show up and say you're a part of this, and you're free. You get in." All right. So I got some great comics. I got some great John Kiriakou who's going to be speaking, and so is Chip Gibbons going to be speaking. So that's at 7 o'clock at the Tabard Inn. I'll make that announcement at the end. I showed up yesterday from New York last night from at Union Station, and when I was here before, I saw a stark reminder how bad this city is in terms of the homeless. There were a lot back then, but when I arrived last night walking through Union Station, there were tons of people, nameless, hopeless, sleeping on the ground at Union Station. And I said to myself, if they were to take the money that they're spending on prosecuting this journalist from Australia and put it into the homeless problem in this city, they could solve it instead of spending hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what they're doing, spending hundreds of millions of dollars and leaving all of these people, not just at Union Station, but across Washington, D.C. This place, it's shameful what is happening in this city, and they are ignoring it, and they're putting their money and ensconcing the guy inside what really is the Tower of London. I looked at a picture of his wife or his fiance this morning, and the 2 kids. How can you look at that? Not only does it affect Julian Assange, look at Stella Morris. Just look at her. And those 2 kids being separated from their father. You know, it's just disgusting. This brilliant individual that has shown the light, as Brian said, on the war crimes and the mass surveillance that the DOJ, the DOD, the CIA, the National Security Agency, we see it. You want to put Julian Assange out of business, then stop committing these crimes and stop spying on us, for Christ's sakes. So I'm looking at that picture and she's out there every day like Lucy Parsons. You remember Lucy Parsons?
Yeah.
On the corner, her husband, and she had 2 kids. And he was framed in the Haymarket Square fire back bombing in 1886, executed. Wasn't even there. And she spent the next 30 years proclaiming his innocence on a corner there in Chicago, just like on days like today. It's even colder in Chicago. That is what Stella Morris is doing. So keep that in mind. She's out there like Lucy Parsons every day doing what she can. So we got to keep fighting. That inspires me when I see that. You know, you mentioned Tulia, Texas. I just want to get this out of the way. I was there. I got a call back this is Germaine, in 2000 from a preacher. Actually, Margaret Kunstler did. She got a letter from a preacher in Tulia, Texas, talking about this drugs thing in the city of 5,000, where 10% of the black population was arrested and put in jail for drug dealing, based on one witness, a witness like the guy that they hired by the name of Ziggy. All right. So we went down there. We spent 3.5 years organized. We made videos. We made a great documentary. Sarah and Emily Kunstler, Bob Herbert came down. We got so much press. And then 3.5 years later, just on the precipice of this thing actually having a good ending, somebody parachuted in and presented herself and said, I'd like to work on one of the briefs. So she worked on one of the briefs. She worked on a habeas brief. And the next thing you know, she's taking credit for everybody getting out. And she used it to get the job here 20 years later. Her name is Vanita Gupta. All right, Vanita Gupta is third in line. She parachuted in to Tulia, Texas, presented herself as this woman that worked at coffee shops and go to law school, you know, at Fordham or something. No, her father is one of the biggest hedge fund operators in the world in the chemical companies, worth billions of dollars. That's where the money comes from. All right, so now she's here. Dick Durbin saying she was the hero to you. Well, she came in 4 years later. She's third in line here. Why is she not standing up and saying, I quit? She should quit. Otherwise, everything she did in the past, and she worked for the ACLU, all the groups that she was associated with before, are now in support of Julian Assange. All of them. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, and yet this woman, parachuted in, got a lot of press, and it's because of that press that she is where she is today. And what they're doing, if they're successful, will snuff out the press if Julian Assange is indeed extradited and sent to a supermax in Colorado. That'll be the end of the press. So we all have something here at stake. This is, as John Pilger said, the end of this fragile ersatz democracy will totally collapse if this were to happen. So that's why we have to continue fighting every day, and that's enough for me right now. Got it out of my system. All right, Vanita, did you hear me? Write her a letter, Vanita Gupta. So, Leo Flores is here today. He's the coach. Leo Flores is from Venezuela, and he's one of the most active members of the free right now. He's with the good side in Venezuela. I think we met at the Venezuela embassy a few years back. 3 years ago, yes. It was really cold then. All right, so Leo Flores, give him a round of applause.
Thank you to Randy and to Paula, of course, for organizing this, and to everyone who's fighting for Assange on a daily basis. I see you all on Twitter every day. I follow you all on Twitter, and I'm really grateful that people keep pushing that Julian is in jail and awaiting extradition to the U.S. He's in jail because he published the truth. I mean, that's the long and short of it, right? He's in jail for embarrassing the United States. And one of the interesting things is, you know, Brian mentioned how eventually the New York Times and the Washington Post, they published some of these videos. They published the leaks of WikiLeaks. But they wouldn't have published it. They wouldn't even have looked into these stories until much, much later, had it not been for Julian Assange. And the thing about Julian is that he exposed the U.S. pretty much almost in real time, maybe a couple of years delayed in some cases, but it wasn't these cases where we're waiting 20, 40, 50 years for Freedom of Information Act requests to go through, where we learn the truth right after, like long after everyone involved has been dead, long after anyone involved can be prosecuted. We learned the truth in real time, a couple of years after it happened in terms of the collateral murder video. And that collateral murder video was so important in part because it was published maybe 4 or 5 months after Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And in that interim, the US government, they tried to deny the video existed. Then they said they had seen it and it was okay, that everyone had followed the rules of engagement, and they got compliant media, members of the media to say the same. And then when we all saw it, we saw that they were lying to us, like they always lie to us about everything that in terms of foreign policy. Everything in general, we have good reason to believe that the US is lying. I mean, all of us live every day under the brutality of this capitalist system. People throughout the global south live feeling the brutality of US imperialism, whether it's bombs or drones or economic warfare. And Julian exposing that is really kind of encouraging to see, because it makes it clear what we're fighting against, right? In a very real way. And that's why they're going after Julian Assange in such a brutal way. Last summer, we were all here, and I know that I remember Gabriel Shipton, his brother, gave a talk at the National Press Club, and he was recounting this tale about how Julian's partner and children were able to visit him at one point. But the guards went to such extreme lengths, they checked the children's mouths to see if they were carrying anything inside their mouths, making the children cry in front of their father, who had already been tortured for how many years? I don't know, for several years by that time. And it's sickening. It's sickening that they're continuing to do that to Julian Assange. And we know that Julian Assange, if he were free right now, he'd still be doing the same thing. He'd be exposing US empire and capitalism and be fighting with the rest of us for a better future. Free Julian Assange.
All right. Thank you, Leo. Muchas gracias, Leo. Venceremos. See? How's that for my Spanish? I was in Nicaragua in the 80s. My Spanish was so bad they thought that I was the new ambassador from the U.S. Way back then. Well, I used to do my Reagan impression down there. Yes. Okay. Sandinistas have done it again. They invaded Honduras. I have a photograph that bears me out. It's not exactly a photograph, it's a shadowgraph, as you can see. All right. I did that on the Tonight Show. You're right, I was on the Tonight Show in '84. I got kicked off because I said that Gene Kirkpatrick, I said, every time I look at Gene Kirkpatrick, I ask myself, did Eva Braun die in that bunker in 1945? And that was it. Johnny said no more. All right. You're going to have to come to the comedy show tonight because you got a big laugh. All right, so my candidate in 1980 for president is here today. Really a remarkable individual. If anybody saw the debates, the one that really did stick out was Marianne Williamson, who you know, she's been a longtime advocate for the poor, for the hungry, for peace. She has had a great idea, the Department of Peace, and I would think that would be such. If you become you should be the head of the Department for Peace. Yeah. Seriously, or president. You'd be president, and then your communications director would be Julian Assange. That would be my dream team. But you all know Marianne Williamson. She's got a wonderful podcast. I had the honor of being on with her, which with a whole bunch of people. This is the biggest podcast ever on Assange just a few weeks back. Would you please welcome Marianne Williamson?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and of course, I agree with everything that has been said so far. And every time we have these kinds of gatherings, whether here in Washington, they've occurred in London, we need them to occur all over this country and in many different places in the world. It's a conversation which must be amplified, and so I'm glad that we're all here to do so. I don't have anything to say that we don't already know, but I think every time that we join together to say these things, we deepen our own understanding and our ability and our willingness to articulate that which needs to be said, so that it becomes a larger and larger issue, and hopefully a larger and larger inconvenience for the people who work in this room. Freedom of the press is obviously as central, as meaningful, as important to our freedom as is anything. and all of us who are gathered here and all of the people around the world who are making a stand for Julian Assange realize that the prosecution and the persecution of Julian Assange is not just directed at him. It is directed to all activists and all people who care about freedom of the press. And so for us to draw our lines, what's happening here is that officialdom sees Julian Assange as a line they're choosing to draw. And we're here because Julian Assange is the line that we are choosing to draw. And even though, as is always the case throughout history, whether it was the forces of slavery, whether it was the forces of the institutionalized suppression of women, whether it was the forces of segregation, it has always been true that when huge forces of injustice are backed by power, money, and government authority, these things are only changed when people just like us stand up and say, in the most traditional American way possible, hell no. And I agree with what has already been stated here as well, that the profound eloquence and graciousness of Stella Morris is such a beacon of light, such an example of, I think, sort of womanhood at our best, of refusing to go away, refusing to shut up, but also refusing to in any way deviate from the best and the most gracious that is within her. We must stand as people now, not only for freedom of the press, we must stand for a radical humanitarianism. It's already been mentioned here, the lack of humanitarian values, the extraordinary lack of mercy that is being shown towards Julian Assange and to his family. But there's an even larger lack of humanitarianism, lack of empathy, even lack of sanity, a larger example of sociopathology, and that is the American war machine that ever perpetrated those wars in Iran and Afghanistan to begin with. It's so important that we get the word out there. The Julian Assange case has nothing to do with Hillary's emails. They have been the forces at work here have been so successful in a smear against Julian based on deep disinformation about this case. This case is about torture. This case was about murder. This case was about atrocities. This case was about war crimes. The person who revealed those things is not the criminal. The people who perpetrated those things are the criminals. And they should not be protected by the people inside this building. When when you were talking about a Department of Peace, the reason there isn't a Department of Peace is because peace building does not make the corporate profits that making war makes. We must change from a war economy to a peace economy the same way that we must change from a dirty economy to a green economy. But it will only happen if we, just us, those of us who are here, and those who agree with us and those who are doing the same thing we're doing around the world, continue to have this conversation. And the conversation is meaningless if we're not willing to stand up for Julian Assange. This case is a vortex. This case is a locust. It's all here. It's not only someone who revealed the crimes of the U.S. war machine, but it is someone who is being punished criminally. The punishment is what is criminal here. The prosecution is what is criminal here. The persecution of him is what is criminal here. He is not the criminal. And we are standing up here today because we are defending not only Julian Assange, but we are defending U.S. press freedom, and we are defending not only the right, but I believe the responsibility of people in our generation, as it is the responsibility of Americans in every generation, to make sure that the U.S. military has a moral core. And when at times such as this, it so clearly does not, it is our responsibility to say so. I hope that all of us here today will leave this place being even more convinced, more committed, more devoted, more articulate, and more willing to say hell no to systems of injustice that absolutely must be pushed back for ourselves in honor of our ancestors and for our descendants. Go, Julian. Thank you.
Marianne Williamson. Are you running again in 2024? You should. You should. It's good that you get out there. You made a lot of great points. I was hoping Bernie Sanders would have picked up on some of your stuff, but he didn't. You were much better than him. We expected him to say something about Julian Assange, but you were the only one that did. I can't. All right. You're right. Marianne Williamson. Remember 2024. Let's draft her. All right? All right. Well, I didn't recognize someone that... I'm not wearing my glasses today. I'm not wearing my glasses. And I had an infected tooth coming down here. My dentist sent me some antibiotics this morning, so it's starting to melt there. I looked like I had a mouthful of tobacco or chewing gum. But she's here, and she has been here patiently. Eleanor Goldberg is a creative activist and writer, and she is the founder of Rooftop Revolutionaries. It's a hard rock group, would you say? It's a hard rock. She's the one that founded it, and she's the lead singer, and she's the host and writer of Occupy.com, Free Speech TV, syndicated, and shout out. All right, I told you I cannot read. I should have memorized that. But she's here now, and she's terrific. She really is a hardcore activist and a winter soldier. Say hello to Eleanor Goldberg.
It's called Field, but you know, whatever. Actually, you know what? It's Goldberg because we're outside the DOJ, so they're going to get my name wrong. I won't end up on their list. So it's Goldberg. Randy, leave it on a high note. You'll have to excuse me, I'm not accustomed to notes, but I'm also not accustomed to having a 7-week-old child, so I had to write shit down because my brain is mush at the moment. But thank you for inviting me out from Baby World. It's kind of nice. He's sorry he couldn't be here, but you know, with all the child labor going on in this country, he's now job searching, so. So interestingly enough, before I do a little spoken word piece, I wanted to give, y'all might already know this, but the DOJ now has a new domestic terrorism unit, which I think is hilarious because they are a domestic terrorism unit. And of course, this is evidenced not just by what's going on with Assange, but historically too. They have a long, long, rich history of going after truth seekers, of going after those who demand and facilitate transparency, who demand accountability and human rights and a livable future. They will always go after these people and label them terrorists when they are in fact the terrorists for denying these basic human rights. And WikiLeaks and Assange brought this kind of terrorism to light, and that's why they are the enemies of empire. And that's also why they are the greatest allies of we the people. And I think it's important as an activist to point out what Assange and WikiLeaks have done for our movements. They have powered our movements by giving us information to fuel our fight. And that's why it's so important that regardless of how you feel about Assange, that you fight for him, because this information is vital for the fights that we have before us. Not just to fight the empire, but to build an alternative, to build something better. And so I think it's important that we remember not to let ourselves be sidelined by petty character assassinations that the likes of the DOJ will put out there, but to find more reasons to fight together than to fight each other. So this is a piece that I wrote about Assange a few years ago, because fuck, this has been going on for far too long. And Paula asked me to do it today. And the ashes of these mistakes, shredded bits of paper, like confetti at a funeral, someone has to burn. Between the lines like crisscross lies, do you ask the light if it's good? A murdered messenger sent us a message, but how easily though? It got lost in the din, 'cause didn't he sin? They'll say, he's an arrogant ass, a pig, don't give him a pass. And yet, here he is, a hostage of holy Rome, a rattler of thrones. Either way, his fate we do own. and this leaking truth, staining a future unknown. If you feel like you're drowning, wake up. The argument's shallow, the precedent deep, and the road to perdition is steep and slick. Will you follow their lead? The leaks can't be damned, but the man so easily damned. 'Cause secrets can't be kept, and lies have shelf lives far too long. Here is the empire's swan song, a failing and flailing hegemony, a Machiavellian tragedy, a grotesque dark comedy, an idiocracy. We are the players, and the played. Does this fucking show have to go on? I don't know this man, but I don't want his blood on my hands. As a child of empire, I'm already soaked. Then you can buy me a beer and we can talk about sin. But here and now, come tear down these gallows, because the ashes of these mistakes are choking out the light. Free Assange. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eleanor Goldfield. Eleanor Goldfield. Never get over that. My grandfather called Emma Goldman Emma Goldberg, and way back in 1910 was the Palmer raids. Now they're the new raids. This is A. Mitchell Palmer in this building. All right, everybody's getting farther back. What is that? I'll put the mask on if you guys get closer. You want some of those fumes on the street to keep you warm. So we have defending. What is it? Did you see that? I agree. So we have a few more speakers, but tonight one of our speakers is don't waste everything on this crowd. I want them to come in. All right, but I want you to talk about what's going on Monday. He's an expert on the Espionage Act, and he had a podcast on it recently, and he's here right now. He runs a group called Defending Rights and Dissent. Mr. Chip Gibbs.
The last time I did one of these events, I was also erroneously described as running Defending Rights and Dissent. My boss was in the audience, so I had to correct it, but she's in the warm today, so yes, I do run Defending Rights and Dissent. As Randy mentioned, my name is Chip Gibbons. Defending Rights and Dissent is an organization that defends your right to know and your freedom to act, and as a result, the indictment of Julian Assange under the Espionage Act for publishing truthful information about U.S. war crimes is a grave threat to both of our right to know and our freedom to act. And the law he is charged under the Espionage Act has for 103 years cast a dark shadow over our First Amendment. This is the law they used to put Eugene Debs in jail. What was Eugene Debs' great crime? He gave a speech in Canton, Ohio, where he said, "If war be right, then let the people decide." And I think there is a clear through line between jailing Eugene Debs, I almost called him Julian Assange, jailing Eugene Debs for saying, let the people decide if this country is going to go to war, and Julian Assange saying, if wars can be started by lies, then peace can be started by truth. The Espionage Act is about taking away our right to know information about U.S. foreign policy and the crimes that our government commits in our name. I don't know how people realize this, but we almost had, a couple months ago, a once in 103-year vote to reform the Espionage Act in Congress. Representative Tlaib introduced an amendment to another bill, the Protect Our Democracy Act, that would have amended the Espionage Act to create a public interest defense, because if you're charged under, you have no public interest defense, and require the government actually prove specific intent to harm national security. The Rules Committee rejected that amendment as being incomplete. They wanted to totally scrap the Espionage Act. That's the completeness they're looking for. I'll go along with that. But we came closer than ever before to actually forcing a vote on the Espionage Act. On Monday, the UK High Court will decide whether or not Julian Assange can appeal their ruling to the Supreme Court that allowed for him to be extradited to the US. assurances that the UK and the US has given the UK are not worth the paper they're printed on. And more importantly, even if those assurances are upheld, they still constitute torture or cruel and degrading treatment under international law. If the High Court denies Julian the right to appeal to the Supreme Court, the decision will go to the Home Secretary. So this is one of our last chances to halt the extradition before it happens. We are fighting not only to save the life of Julian Assange, because many people do not think he will survive extradition to the US. We are fighting to save our First Amendment, and we are fighting to save press freedom globally. What's happening is a superpower is asserting the right to try anyone anywhere in the world. Remember, Julian Assange is not a US citizen. Under its Espionage Act, bring them to this country, put them on trial, and lock them away in a dungeon for exposing their war crimes. So this isn't just the US First Amendment, this is press freedom globally, and this is our right to resist militarism and war crimes and imperialism that is at stake right now. Thank you very much.
For a little bit. I go back in 2 weeks. See you again.
And Leo, whoever spoke so far, before you leave, I want to get a picture with everybody that spoke.
No, thank you.
We're going to get a group photo before Leo, Code Pink, my favorite group. Everybody, everybody.
I don't have a mask. I feel like
all
I
right.
should.
And then Marty, who came all the way down from D.C. for the day. Marty Goldman. From New York. Marty Goldfeld. No.
Let's
Gold.
get this so you can see everybody.
Harry Gold, the one that was involved in the Rosenberg. All right, all right, everybody come up here. We're going to get a group picture. Lucian. I'll say Lucian instead of. Well, I'll say Lucian. Also here, I see Nathan Fuller from the Courage Foundation.
Taking a picture at the same time. So
round of applause. Nathan came in. Paula, you're up front, right up here. This is your event.
taking a bunch. Everybody smile. Okay, if you want to look at it before everybody moves. I took like 10 of them, 20 of them. That's fine.
All right, you're good?
I'm respectfully, you got it?
All right, everybody get real close.
I'm respectfully not participating in the picture because I don't have a
Moment of
mask.
silence for my
I'll have my
MC
mask, so I'm not
today.
going to be in the picture. It's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind.
We'll get a real good one at 7 o'clock at the Tabard Inn, all right? Get up there. It's free. You get to see some great comedians that are connected to Redacted tonight. Jaffer Khan and Yoki Danoff. See that? Tonight at 7 o'clock. And John Karaoke. Maybe he's there now waiting. He didn't show up here. He
Thanks.
went to the wrong spot.
You can send me that one
thought
later.
this comedy show was 2 instead of 7. This was 7 instead of 2. So we got everybody, Brian Becker.
Get another one?
Where
We're getting me in front of it.
we taking more pictures? That's it? We're still taking some photos? All right. We actually had 300 people here, but it got cold.
Yeah.
All right. So
maybe like 50 to 100.
we got the pictures. I want to bring up Marty, because Marty, he organizes rallies and vigils up in New York, and he came all the way down there for the day and is going right back up because he can't stand my comedy. I don't blame him. But he did show up at the one in New York. Marty Goldman came all the way up. He's a union organizer in New York, and he's been really strong in support of Assange. So he's got a few words he'd like to say.
Can't get it to zoom in.
Okay, hello. Can't get my lips to move. All right. Other